Hello, Kaylee.
Hello, Ash.
Uh, Today we're talking about a fun one that I feel like I used to get into a lot of arguments about this back when Facebook was relevant. Um, Talking about the
Back in
myth
the
of the
day.
yeah myth of
We
the
say
free
that as that's
market.
their biggest platform.
What's that?
I
Yeah,
said we say that like Facebook is our biggest platform still. Like it's not
still
it's not dead.
no, but everybody knows. It's not what it used to be.
It's
Even
not.
before Zuck became overtly fascistic,
Yeah.
it's just not what it used to be.
It's everybody's like secondary or tertiary social media. It's nobody's main social media anymore.
No, I I wouldn't think so. Uh, so uh, to start things off, given that we're both, we're fairly scholarly, I thought we could look up the definition of free market on this thing called the internet, which I mean is a pretty good way to figure out things in life. It's usually got the best definitions, especially this thing called Wikipedia. So let's go there. That's where this is the thing. It's a little secret that a lot of people don't know about folks who are actually scholars. I start on Wikipedia a lot just to kind of like follow the threads. So it's not a bad idea, but this is kind of why like an idea like free market is such a contested term. So here's what it says. In economics, free market is an economic system in which the prices of goods and services are determined by supply and demand expressed by sellers and buyers. Such markets, as modeled, operate without the intervention of government or any other external authority. Proponents of the free market as a normative ideal contrast it with a regulated market in which a government intervenes in supply and demand by means of various methods, such as taxes or regulations. So, in an idealized free market society, prices for goods and services are set solely by the bids and offers of the participants. So, I mean,
Yeah. It
you know,
sounds nice.
it sounds nice. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, on the surface of it, the definitions, if I were setting up a video game like The Sims or something where you had to have exchange and people set their own
Hmm.
terms, like barter prices, fine. Part of the reason why this is a myth, in one sense, is that it's never existed.
Yeah, it really hasn't. At least not in
No,
like a societal way.
no, like small scale interpersonal. You could say
Sure.
like, yeah, if I had let's see, if I wanted to trade my uh, books by Bernard McGinn about Christian spirituality, there's like about 10 of them, for a laptop computer, and we just both felt good about the transaction. We could call that a free market, but that's
You
not a
could.
market. But that's not a
No.
market. Um, I don't know why my Alexa device just spoke to me in the background.
That I I didn't hear it, so maybe it didn't come through, but
So it could also be an auditory hallucination.
maybe.
Um, so
Maybe Alexa is like listening in and is like they're talking about free market. We need to interrupt.
yeah, that seems plausible. But here's the thing: uh, when talking about some kind of social myth, um, people tend to want to start with like assessing uh, the idea on its own merits in an abstract
Mhm.
philosophical way. I tend to think it's better if you're talking about a generally like a pervasive idea like free market that kind of informs our lives and informs the systems of our lives and is often something that is kind of abstract and invisible. It's better to talk about it in a different way, I think, which is when is it invoked, for
Mhm.
why, and what is often obscured or hidden when it's invoked. That's a little more of a critical theory approach to it.
Yeah.
In my experience, the idea of free market is usually only ever really invoked when people are pitting it against, like in this definition here. I'm going to pull that back up again. Uh,
Well, it seems like every time the free market is talked about is in reference to capitalism, as if free market only exists in capitalism, which is inherently not true.
yeah,
Technically, there was a free market in the feudal system. It's just the serfs weren't the ones like competing. Like that's still a free market, because it's
yeah. As
well
much as there can be one,
could
yeah.
be, I guess. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And see, it's in this little Wikipedia thing. It's usually contrasted with a regulated market. So usually,
Mhm.
when people are bringing up the concept of a free market, it's to push against um, social programs or
Yeah.
government intervention. It's seen as the antithesis to socialism, and why it's important, I think, to kind of recognize that is it's usually this way of saying um, we need to embrace things that kind of Reagan talked about because really, if you want to understand why things are bad, why are things bad in a lot of African nations that that we don't talk
I mean,
about as
it
a
can't
society?
it can't be the colonization. It has to be
No,
something
it's
else.
too much government intervention, too much corruption, and if the free market could reign,
Mhm.
then it would sort itself out. Now, what is it being obscured when we talk about that? Like you said, colonization, um, but also what colonization is an example of, which is power. Uh, can't have a free market where some people have power over other people. That's kind of like it seems really obvious to me that that's true, but it's surprising how many people will argue that point. And
Yep.
if pushed into a corner, they'll say, "Well, you're right. Corporations do have more power than individuals, and it's not okay. But the reason they have that power is because of the government. And if we could get the government out of things, then we could have free market."
Yeah.
And it's bizarre because like if we rewind to the quote unquote progressive era, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, where there was substantially less government intervention in markets. Um, you see what happens. This is where we get robber
Yeah,
barons and banana republics and
yeah.
workers
It
losing their hands, like
yeah, it's
harvesting
also where we
bananas.
have child labor. It's where we have unsafe working conditions, like you said. It's where we have a lot of environmental pollution. Um,
Hmm.
b- Basically, whenever there's no regulation and everything is just free, bad things happen.
Yeah.
That has been seen all throughout history.
Um, and we could spiral off into so many directions because free market is just one piece of capitalism. So I'm going to try to be restrained and focus on
But
the idea
again, it's
of
not
markets.
just capitalism. But we associate it so much with capitalism. Like it can exist in in other types of economic systems.
Yeah, so there is something like at least theoretically called market socialism. And
Mhm.
so if you're going to ask a socialist, of which I am a socialist, an anti-authoritarian socialist, which I know is an oxymoron to a lot of people, but we're not doing that episode. We'll,
We'll do that
we'll
one
get to it
later.
later. Um, i- if I were to say like let's say we had a small city of 100,000 people and we had our own
Mhm.
kind of market economy, what would make it free? To a
I mean,
socialist to a socialist, what gives someone freedom is things like democracy. So if everyone um, was basically coming from a shared sense of resources, like if
mhm.
land and natural resources from the land were held in the commons, if workers owned the means of production, and we had something like radical democracy, then you could have a free market because
Yeah.
it'd be hard for one person to have power over another. But if I'm entering into a transaction, let's say Mark Zuckerberg, let's stick with Zuckerberg because
Okay.
I rip on Elon Musk too much.
Do you
I
though?
don't. I don't. It's just Zuckerberg is a funner name to say out loud, I guess. So let's say he's
It's
good
true.
old Zuck lived in our town, but he owned half of the houses that he rented to tenants, so he could
Mhm.
set the prices, and he also owned the factory. Um,
Yeah.
and he didn't own everything, but he's the big player. That you can't have a free market. You can't have transactions with him on equal footing.
Yeah.
And this is why
It,
people don't like bringing up what you brought up earlier about colonization when you in this conversation is because that
that also
when the
plays into
land
it.
and resources are conquered and taken, and so that
Mhm.
people's relationship with the land is severed, you can't have free transactions.
No. But also like the understanding of free market does within the definition is supposed to be uh, individuals. Um, we don't have an economy that is individualistic. We have a corporation economy. And so like this idea that it's individuals setting prices, that's not actually true. Um, we like the reason places like Walmart can be like sell things cheap is because a lot of times they will make deals with suppliers. And have you ever bought deodorant from Walmart by versus buying it at say Target? I know they were boycotting Target and we should be boycotting Walmart. I don't know where else would you buy deodorant? Um,
Like if
Publix.
you're an
Yeah, you
urban
can buy deodorant at
if you're an
Publix.
urban hippie, you can buy like deodorant that is made out of like patchouli and hippie sweat at
That
like
yeah,
the co-ops. Um,
it's true. But my point is like,
yeah, or Amazon. You
you
buy
can
it on
get the
Amazon, or maybe Walgreens. But all these companies, yeah. Anyways,
they're all problematic. But anyways,
mhm,
Walmart will actually sell like a product with cheaper plastic or like I don't know. I get um the kind that kind of clicks every time you spin it, right?
mhm.
Uh, but the Walmart version doesn't have that because that's an extra little piece of plastic, and so they save money and can sell it cheaper because like the packaging is in fact cheaper. Or they'll
Wait,
sell it
wait.
at the same price and it'll be
How
yeah.
do you advance the like? So I'm assuming you
No,
use
you
the
still
bar
twist
deodorant.
it. Like you
Oh, but
still
the
twist
click
it,
doesn't happen, is
but
what
there's
you're
no
saying.
click. Yeah,
It's
so
not
you
like a
could twist
push-up
it.
pop that you're trying to
No,
push.
no, no, no.
Yeah, okay, because I could save
It's
even
like
more money.
it's yeah, it's like lip balm, where you can go both directions. Yeah, it's like that. Whereas the fancy version that you can get at another store clicks and you can't go back.
I'm very
Anyways, the point,
I'm very wasteful. I use spray deodorant, so yeah.
yeah. So this isn't my point is companies will always find ways to make deals with manufacturers to bring
Mhm,
down the prices so they can own a larger share of the market. The problem is because they are a corporation and they buy so much, that means that like your local um your local like market on a street corner, which I live where I live, we actually do have a few like locally owned markets. Mostly you just get food, but like they're never going to get into the deodorant selling like market. um
mhm,
necessarily because you're not saying that they would want to per se, because I think selling specialty food is kind of fun, but like they couldn't anyways, just because they cannot make the deals with the suppliers to sell at a market at a reasonable price where everybody is comparing like their price with Walmart. Um, so that's not a free market
mhm,
because individual that's not competition whenever somebody is able to remove the competition.
mhm,
And there used to be there used to be a law that suppliers couldn't like everybody had to have the chance to sell everything at the same price,
mhm.
and that got done away with because that's not free market. Um,
Yeah, and this is
yeah.
let's talk about, you know, uh, a really common product. Like when we're talking about when you try to talk about economics with someone who is like super duper into this concept of free market as
Mhm.
a realm of voluntary exchange that is natural, that basically we've always done this. It was barter, and then now we have currency economies, and so capitalism, if we think about it, is natural. That's kind of the argument procession. And they use examples of like, I have a cow and you have chickens. I'll give you one
Mhm.
cow for 50 chickens. And that is such a nice children's story. But like then when you talk about
Yeah.
something like, this is my cell phone, it's a nice one, it's a Samsung, expensive.
Yeah, you
There
got
are,
the nicer version than me.
yeah, because I'm worth it, damn it.
Yeah, that's right.
So here's the thing: this is not a commodity. Really, it's just made up of a bunch of commodities, including like
Mhm.
lithium and stuff that's extracted from like African nations,
With
right?
child labor.
Yeah, and so let's talk about free market at that level. Okay, so
Yeah.
if one of the most valuable materials in my phone is something that is extracted from land in I'm not sure which nations, but I know like
I think
Congo.
Congo,
Um,
yeah, is a
yeah,
big one.
uh, my sense is they're not getting a proportionate amount of the like when this phone is sold. Let's say, and I don't know, let's say 5% of the value of this. Let's say this is $1,000 phone, and so $50 of it, um, and these numbers are off, by the way, just for sake of example. $50 doesn't go towards the people who mined the materials. There's no free market at that level. And so
Yeah.
when it finally gets to the consumer level, there's such a chain of custody of products and so many levels of exploitation along the way. The idea of talking about the free market as voluntary exchange is meaningless if every
Mhm.
step in that chain has power dynamics that exploit. And
Yeah.
so this is where it's weird to me to say, I'm a capitalist, I like the free market. Therefore, we need to pull out any government intervention and just allow everyone to exchange things. Um, we live in a world where Africa was colonized, and that's kind of the reason why we have situations like we do in Africa with exploitation. You had
Mhm.
colonizers divide up Africa into nations that were artificial, that were did not follow the logic of mostly tribal peoples,
Mhm.
and then set up puppet governments, and then continue to exploit. Colonization
Yeah.
is not a past tense thing. Even
It
if Algeria is no longer under the sovereignty of France, they're still exploited by France. That still
absolutely.
happens,
And
right? So, like, what do we talk?
because you give the people that because colonization, like, some people will look at, well, there's, there are people from this nation that thrived under colonization. Yeah, there is always going to be people that take advantage of this.
Mhm,
So, like, looking at the people who benefit off of something and to ignore those who become more oppressed is rather problematic to say the least.
mhm,
But also, like, because of the way that the rewarding those who fall in line kind of is it's circular,
cyclical.
a cyclical, that's it, type
Mhm,
thing where, um, like, whenever, say, like, France or England pulled out of these nations, it's still the people that they propped up under colonization that
mhm,
then took over. So it's there is still, even though it's like we're no longer running this nation, their influence is still there because that is also part of colonization, is to so so put put like the colonizers' worldview into those who have been colonized, to the point where there's really no way to like extract the colonization from who they are now.
no,
And yeah,
and
so it's an ongoing thing.
and I haven't thought about that, but my brain is still thinking about the word cyclical. That's
Sorry.
it's a hard word, but no, but like
Yeah.
it's one of those words that it sounds really naughty if you say it slow.
Yes,
Cyclical, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just a freebie for the viewers or listeners. So the question is, if free, this idea of freedom is itself kind of baked up in all kinds of myths. But let's say we
Mhm.
wanted things to be as free as possible, meaning that uh, you know, within a liberal economy system, liberal in the classic sense, where individual rights, individual ownership, that kind of idea, which is
Yeah.
problematic. But let's say that's what we're going for. The question then becomes, what do we do to make the market the most free? And like we think about things like eggs. So right now, eggs became the example for our economy and why Trump needed to be elected for a lot of people. Um, there's a reason why egg prices went up. He could say we
Yeah.
need to bring those egg prices down without really explaining the economics of it. The reason why eggs cost a lot has a lot to do with uh, avian flu,
Yeah.
uh, supply lines. It's not
But,
when you're talking.
like, medical pandemics, um, within a species isn't necessarily something that is believed in by everybody.
Mhm.
So,
So like,
really, it was a conspiracy. Um, and Biden ordered the execution of chickens to make eggs cost more and not to stop the
yeah,
stop bird flu, it's yeah.
and this is where I feel like the capitalists tell on themselves because under the logic of a free market, if you the reason eggs cost so much is because, like theoretically, anyways, the supply is low and the demand
Mhm.
is high, so then the price goes up.
Yeah.
That's what a free market's supposed to do. So when Trump talks about tariffs and these other things as a remedy, that's not free market. Now, and this is where I feel like it exposes the reality of things. You might still get your true Tea Party style libertarians that say, we shouldn't be involved in any of that stuff and let the market sort itself out. But usually the biggest proponents of capitalism um, are still nationalist about it, or at
Yeah.
least they'll exploit nationalism. So in this case, saying like the United States will use its might um, to pull the levers of economic control to get better prices on eggs. Now, we don't do that. That's not what's actually happening. That Trump's not doing anything about eggs. Um,
No.
we don't apply that logic with getting medicine from Canada at a cheaper rate. Why? It's because really this free market capitalism language is often a sleight of hand to
Mhm.
conceal power. It's not in the economic benefit. It's not to the economic benefit of the people who are in power to have medical prices be low.
Yeah,
Um,
of
if
course.
if we had a free market, um, like a truly free market, would allow for um, health care for all, I think, because it'd be democratic, and we could then negotiate for lower prices at least. We can't.
But
And
so
but if we did that, then all of a sudden these gigantic medical companies wouldn't get as much profit, and so
yeah. So
but that.
so let's just look at something that is, like, kind of core to how, the Western market works.
Mhm,
Um, Copyright laws or, uh,
mhm,
patent laws, right?
mhm.
Those are inherently non-free market. Free market would say, "Oh, you made that, I can make that too, and then now we can have a competition, and we sell it at a kind of reasonable price." The fact that we have patents means that we actually don't have a free market because yeah, and a lot of, like, what you're talking about, like, medical prices, like, um a lot of that has to do with patents and the fact that if you are the only like organization that can produce a medicine, you can sell it for whatever price you want.
Mhm.
This is kind of why insulin is so freaking high, even though it does not cost that much to make. It's because there is a hold on the market that other people can't necessarily get into. So, like,
Yeah, and
kind of, like, idolize patents and copyrights and things like that within the United States, and don't get me wrong, I actually especially copyrights, I support them,
yeah, within a
a
system
little
like
bit.
this, if you
Yeah.
don't have it, like, people who are struggling will get fucked over.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. A
so so
absolutely.
imperfect protections are still protections. In an
Yes.
ideal world, music would be like how it was within the folk scene. So, uh, when when Jimi Hendrix did "All Along the Watchtower," he wasn't sued by Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
Uh, they were just it was kinda like, "Let's all riff off of each other." Now you can't do that because music is owned by companies. It's not a creative
Mhm. It's not owned
expression.
by individuals,
Yeah,
normally.
um, or it is, but there's still, like, deals and contracts that kinda get in the way
Yeah.
of all that stuff. Um, and so there's so many layers, like, and, really, if we're gonna talk about, and maybe we should do this next time, if we're gonna talk about free markets, we have to talk about other, myths that conceal, like, the myth of property. What is property?
Mhm.
That's a big one to unpack, which maybe we'll do that next time or
That one's
shortly
gonna need to
after.
be yeah.
Multi. Um, but really, it kinda comes down to back to this issue of power, like, um, consumers don't we're told we have a lot of power. This is part of the adjacent myth of the free market, that somehow,
Mhm.
let's say, for example, we want a clean earth, then we need to use our free exchange in the free market to buy products that are nicer to the earth. And then if we do that, then it'll scale up and we'll have less environmental destruction. Now,
It sounds
on the
nice.
cert that's and there's some truth to that. Like, I'm not gonna,
Mhm.
like I don't drink bottles of Code Red and throw it out my
Mhm.
window into the yard. I recycle. I don't drink Code Red. That's an example I was just using. But if I drink
I don't even know if they
LaCroix,
make Code Red anymore.
they gotta. It's like the it's like saying Limp Bizkit doesn't exist anymore. They're
That's
still
fair.
around. Um, yeah, like recycling. There's certain things that just is kind of common sense. It's a flawed system, but it's the classic example of their corporations used to have to, like, not destroy the earth with their products.
Yeah.
It was cheaper for them to switch from glass, which is more sustainable and reusable, like, because
Mhm.
people get their milk delivered to their door, right? And then they circulate the bottles, right?
Well,
Plastic's
also,
cheaper.
like, industrial, recycling is better with glass as well.
Mhm. So it's just a better,
It's
product
better product,
material
yeah.
to use. But plastic's cheaper to make,
Mhm.
cheaper, it weighs less, so you can ship more, at less cost. You can recycle it, but most not. Like, that little symbol that's on every plastic thing with the triangle shape with the arrows is
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
recycling symbol. People think it means it's recyclable. That's the type of plastic it is. Only one
yeah.
type of that is recyclable. But we don't know that.
Or if
Why
you're
do we think
lucky,
that?
maybe 2 types.
Yeah. Why do we think that that's a recycling symbol? And why are we in the responsibility of having to recycle, even though uh, most of it doesn't recycle and there's so much intensive cost at the local municipal level of waste, and then we have
Mhm.
islands floating in the ocean of trash. That's because companies decided to pass the cost to us. There's the unspoken cost within that exchange of environmental degradation, loss of habitats and resources that is not
Yeah,
factored in to the price of a bottle of Code Red. And so the company, instead of selling the product at a proper cost and covering all of the hidden costs with the profit they make so that it's a free exchange, They
Mhm.
taint our land and they fuck us over and then tell us it's up to us to recycle. So we're not
Yeah.
only so there's power is filtering throughout all of that to exploit people and systems, including ecological systems,
Yeah.
so that the company can extract as much money from us as possible. That's not free
And,
market.
yeah. And we also have to understand that there's the power dynamics of some people can't, like they make being able to buy things in glass, like clearly it costs more, but also there's kind of a like bougie markup to it as well. Um,
Mhm,
which does make more sustainable type products uh less accessible to a very large proportion of society because um the way like wage gaps in the United States are get increasingly larger. Our people who are poor are getting poorer. People who are rich are getting richer. And really, if you're not in that 1%, you're probably getting less rich. But
mhm.
so there is a power dynamic there where the 1% is exploiting the lower part of society and in some ways blaming them um for litter, for like uh waste that goes into the environment, for pollution of our water systems, and not actually looking at like the fact that it is a system that uses people who do not have money to further gain money. um it that's why like who did the like talk on how expensive it is to be poor because a poor person can't buy, like, I think the example that they use is a poor person can't buy shoes that will last, 4 years, so they have to buy some that last a year, but because they have to buy it every single year, they end up spending more money over time, but they can't afford it right now. Um, so it is a form of exploiting those who just don't have the money to get the more
It's
expensive products.
it's more expensive to be poor in all
It
kinds
is.
of ways. Even from
Yeah.
like, we're a small nonprofit. As far as nonprofits go, we're poor. Um,
Mhm,
and so that means like things like we have to pay more for the same thing. A big
mhm,
company could pay for a subscription to a software annually. A smaller, organization might have to pay monthly because they can't pay all at once, and so then you pay more over
mhm.
time. Just like you can't secure as much debt, which is the other thing about the free market, and this is a whole other big topic, is the reality of what debt is. You can't have a
Mhm.
free market in a debt-based system. Um, if, I'll recommend a book, and maybe we'll have a whole topic on this sometime. Debt by David Graeber. Have you ever heard of that or read that?
I haven't, no. I
Um,
got nervous whenever you started to say Dave and was worried.
which Dave would. Oh, is there that Christian weird
Yeah,
financial
yeah,
counselor? Dave,
yeah.
what's that guy's name?
Dave Ramsey.
This mug's for
Yeah.
you, Dave Ramsey.
The person who doesn't own, multiple, multiple housing properties, he, he manages them because God owns everything.
He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, my friend. For those who
Yeah.
couldn't see when I said this mug's for you, I'm drinking from a mug. It's my partner's mug. It
That
says it
yeah,
says "Eat a bag of dicks" on it. Classic. Um, just to kind of nod towards that book by David Graeber, who
there we go.
may he rest in power. He passed away like 5 years ago. Um, it he's an anthropologist, and he's challenging the narrative, the history of um, what we think of as economics, because there's this, and I'm not going to go too far down this road, but it ties in with this idea of free market. There's this idea that capitalism and free exchange, the way we think about it, and the way capitalist minded people talk about it, is natural. Back in the day, people traded. They'd grunt and point at their goat, and then the other person would grunt and point at their guinea pigs, and they exchange right?
The
And then it
the
became
barter
too
system.
difficult. Yeah, the
Yeah.
barter system. And the barter system became too difficult to figure out, so they decided to have like, well, these 5 of these, puka shells equals 1 chicken, and then we can have this sort of thing. And then from there, people started borrowing. Like, I'm gonna borrow some puka shells from my neighbor Gyorp. Like, I'm trying to use caveman language here. Gyorp is a name from the caveman era. Uh,
Of course it is.
so that you can buy more chickens because you want to start your chicken operation and then sell the eggs to the other
Mhm.
cave people. And so that's where debt is born. That's not what actually happened. Like, so uh, anthropologically and what we know historically is um, uh, people tended to, within communities, like let's say you were in a village, you tended to operate within a gift economy.
Mhm.
There was tendency to share. You didn't have people each owning swaths of land and then they'd leverage against each other. That was kind of antithetical to tribal living. There's a whole, we could take a whole detour through the ancient Hebrew scripture, like what the scriptures say about ancient Hebrew culture, about debt and economics here too, which would be fascinating, but we're not going to go down there. Um,
There's a
and
lot there.
so there's a lot there. Bartering came when you were exchanging with people outside your village. And then currencies came about
Yeah.
after debt. Um, Currencies were created by nations of some sort or governance, people that were usually like had some sort of conquering or ownership of people. And so there was usually debt and slavery are tied together.
Mhm.
When we tell that, the reason I'm telling that is pointing towards that. And again, Debt by David Graeber is worth checking out. There's this idea of a free market. People who believe capitalism makes so much sense and should be normative at the end of history, want to act like it's always been some sort of capitalism.
Yeah.
Reality is, capitalism is um, came about during the colonial era, depending on
Mhm.
where you point towards. The
Yeah, there's a
enclosures,
few
the
different.
enclosures,
Yeah.
the enclosure laws under Henry VIII, or is it
Mhm.
with mercantile colonization? Um,
Which, by the way, it always targeted women, at any time, like, at every point of history that people point to say, "Oh, this is the start of capitalism," um, always matched with, some type of major, like, marginalization of women because those apparently always go hand in hand.
Yeah, I feel like generally all the kinds of exploitations tend to happen
That's
around
fair.
that. Yeah, but like, yeah, there's a lot of. It just points to all the sort of um, unspoken exploitations and power dynamics that are obscured when we say free market.
Yeah.
Um, when
People
the
get
free
really.
market, as it's described, has never existed, is not
Yeah.
some sort of utopian far history that we can get back to. We go back if we want to invoke some sort of natural state with our economics, then we have to look at things like gift economy,
Mhm.
communal life. Um, for another people who like to read, check out The Conquest for Bread by Peter Kropotkin. That's a good one, classic anarchist text. He learned his anarchism as a naturalist by when he was visiting villages in Siberia that still tended to operate under gift economy logic. Um, so this idea that the basic natural state of human beings is free market um, is a myth that gets told by
Yeah.
mostly powerful people so that you can stay fucked over without complaining.
Yeah. It's a fantasy that people will put ahead of you to justify capitalism, and like you said, capitalism wouldn't have started if slavery wasn't a thing. There is no conceivable instance of capitalism starting without some form of slavery and exploitation of other human beings. Generally, other human beings and, the land and natural resources, but yeah. And people get really mad at me when I point that out on our social media platforms, because we believe so strongly in capitalism within the United States that we will literally just let it destroy uh, our society trying to maintain it, because capitalism is not maintainable. A lot of times we talk about late stage capitalism. Um, that's because capitalism is failing, and it's failing hard. I would possibly recommend that we have moved past late stage to probably end stage capitalism, uh, which I I do welcome the end of capitalism, but I am worried about how it ends,
Yeah,
because that can be messy.
I can't remember the name. I referenced him in one of the essays I wrote on our Substack, which is this is a little commercial.
Little promo.
We're you know we do this every other week. We do a lot of Substack stuff, and we want to do more content of different kinds. Like I want to do some kind of essay style videos. We have a new a book called The Inaction Planner that is going to be
Mhm.
on sale here pretty soon. A lot of things that we're doing, but in order to maintain ourselves, we need your help. And there's a few ways you can do that. Share this, like, subscribe, share. We want to get up to that golden level of monetization. Praise capitalism. Um, Also, if you see on the top here, it says, our Substack link, prophetikimagination.substack.com. Please subscribe there and consider um, being a paid subscriber. You wrote something for our paid subscribers, right?
I did. So we're
And
starting a new thing for our paid subscribers where it's a read as I write type thing, where I'm writing a commentary on the book of Matthew. And
mhm,
I posted the introduction, the forward, and um, most of the commentary in chapter one.
mhm.
But it's not like, this isn't a commentary of like, this is a progressive look at the Bible and find Christianity through this. That's not what this is. It's more of the fact that within our society, uh, Ash disappeared, so I'm not sure what's going on there. So maybe I disappeared. Um, but I'm gonna keep going because I'm not
Yeah, keep
100%
keep
sure on
going.
why. Okay. Yeah. But essentially, Christianity is like a major drive of harm within our world, and so creating counter narratives for people who do still find uh, something out of that tradition, um, or or for people who are just looking for a better way to understand this, because there's so much harm within Christianity that I think it's important to actually look at some of the things that is supposedly foundational. Um, but even if that is not your interest, the book of Matthew is specifically, in my point of view, a ancient text that is passing on wisdom about how to oppose an empire. Um, so it's really, the title of it is called "How to Overthrow an Empire: A Commentary on Matthew," and that's really what it's going to be. I think that uh, the central message of the book of Matthew is very much um, this idea of how do we like combat the Roman Empire, but in
Mm.
that there's a lot of wisdom, because we live in a very empire type setting where there is a lot of oppression.
So can you see me now?
I can see you now.
It just like crapped out, and I had to unplug it and replug it back in, and then it did this thing. It zoomed into my face. You know, I don't like that. Anyways, I'm gonna back up a bit. So there we go. Just a little plug. Like I guarantee that if you read what Keeley writes about the Gospel of Matthew, um, you some of you will like really enjoy it and find it refreshing and liberatory, and other of you will get pissed off. And that's kind of what good Bible scholarship does. So
Yeah,
check that
yeah.
out. I'm going to be starting to write some quote unquote premium essays too. Um, my approach for the stuff that I'm going to write for our paid subscribers is going to be like kind of like digging deep into how we think about uh, resistance and collective liberation. Um, so, but kind of each article will stand alone. It won't be part of an ongoing project, at least for now. So check that out. Subscribe. Um, it doesn't cost that much to be a paid subscriber, and it helps us a lot.
It
Um,
does. I
yeah,
love how we're like wrapping up our discussion on free market with like the most capitalistic things that we can do. But in our
yeah.
defense, we, we are the two of us are not able to stop capitalism on our own, and we need to eat food still within our capitalistic society.
hmm We have to figure out pressure points that are meaningful where we can um, basically bring like I'm using the word democracy. It's a problematic term that is also baked up like in with a bunch of myths. Um,
Yeah,
but
especially when you
liberation doesn't come from opting out and trying to start uh, some sort of colony in the woods. That's not really how it works. Bringing more of power back to the people who are generally being exploited, and also returning land to the commons. There's all kinds of things that are big picture. The small picture is figuring out how to be ethical with our resources in the here and now, and how to start like really thinking about our world in ways that end suffering. And so, like an essay on Substack can only do too much, but it's worth it. It's worth that exchange within this quote unquote free market. Um, but it does tie into all these other myths, and I think maybe not next time. We still haven't decided what we're going to talk about next time, but we're going to have to talk about property here pretty soon. That's usually, if I
yeah,
could think of one myth that is central to Western society that is the most unquestioned, it would be the idea of private property.
yeah.
So that'll be a good one to explore.
It will. I'm yeah. I will make sure to do a lot more research on that one too. Um, Not because I don't agree. It's just like I know how much that one like we can get on here and talk about free market and talk about how like there is no free market because it's pretty clear once you start investigating. However, like the myth of private property, and the difference, like most of us do not understand the difference between private property and personal property, uh,
hmm
which there is a significant difference. So that one's going to be a fun one to
Yeah,
get
and
super nerdy
and
on.
unlike the idea of a free market, there actually is functionally something called private property. Like it's illegal.
Mhm.
It, it's declaring a relationship with land and buildings and things that may not be natural, but it's
Yeah,
enforceable. You can't enforce free market. Uh, it's That's more of a bald faced lie that we have a free market or have ever had one.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Private property is a philosophy that has to be accepted or contested. It's a little different
yeah.
kind of
It's
myth. So
it's quite a bit different.
yeah, um, yeah. So help us acquire more private property by subscribing to our Substack and becoming a premium member or paid subscriber, whatever it's called. And so we can keep putting some of this stuff out and some of the other goodies we have. So with that,
Yeah,
we'll see you next time. Hopefully, I won't disappear halfway through next time.
that's okay. I'll just start talking randomly until
And
I see you come back,
okay,
like this time.
okay. See y'all.
See ya.